Okay. Hi, Remy. How are you doing today? Are you able to unmute yourself?
Yes, hi, good morning.
Okay. Well, Remy today is live from United States. It's passive. I think specifically in Boston. Are you in
Mhm.
Boston still, or? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So, our friends here, our colleagues here are going to have like a very fun and also interactive writing workshop with Rami. And Rami is also part of our proofreader team. Sometimes our clients also, like ask for native proofreaders. So that's why like Rami is the one among others too that is handling some, like editing jobs at Sastra Lingua Indonesia. Well, okay. Welcome to the students, yeah, from University of Mathlaul Anwar, which is located in Banten. Well, I've been to Banten before, but not for holiday. It's just, like passing through the city. But later on, maybe if we have like some rendezvous, then we can just, meet together with the students from University of Mathlaul Anwar. Okay. Well, without further ado, let's just begin our session today. The topic of our session today is the art of writing a medical article, which means that you are guys are now, like practicing the way to write, like an article that is eligible for publication, either in journal or probably in other media. All right, so let's just give the floor to Remy. Please, Remy.
Okay. Thank you, Ema, for that introduction. I'm gonna share my screen. Okay. All right. So you guys can see it now. Okay, great. So like Ema said, I'm Remy. Um, Ema and I met at UMass Amherst, where we both studied in Massachusetts. Um, so yeah, it's great to be able to talk to you guys today. As she said, I'm going to talk about the art of writing a medical science article or a research paper. Um, I want it to be interactive. I know it's early for you guys. I'm 12 hours behind, so it's nighttime for me. But yeah, if you guys have any questions or anything, just feel free to ask throughout the presentation. Um, yeah, so just a little bit about me. Like I said, I graduated from the University of Massachusetts Amherst with a degree in biology and a minor in psychology. Um, I've always been fascinated by science, and that's been a really big interest for me. So, right when I started college, I got involved with research my freshman year or my first year of college at UMass. My interests are neuroscience. And so most of my work has been in that area. I know you guys might not study that, but that's mostly what my research has been on. And as of now, I'm 2 years post grad. I am currently working at Boston Children's Hospital as a clinical research assistant. So I'm still a part of research. My lab specializes in epilepsy or seizures. And yeah, in the future, right now I'm applying to medical school. So I'm hoping to become a doctor. Um, with that, being involved in science and being in research, you're always going to want to be working on your scientific writing skills. So Um, I'm just going to share some of the tips and tricks I've learned through my 6 years in research. I wanted to start with this quote because um, as a student and as a young professional, I know that it can be nerve-wracking and you might feel like you don't know enough or you're not a good enough writer to contribute to research. But writing is a skill and it can be practiced and it can be learned. And I've written now my thesis. I've been a part of a couple papers, and I feel like, throughout these years, I've worked on those skills and I've been able to see myself grow as a writer. And I hope you guys will be able to do that as well. So, this quote by Albert Einstein says, "If you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough." And I feel like that really pertains to scientific writing because a lot of times the most technical papers aren't the best ones. It's the ones that simplify ideas so that everyone can understand them, no matter what field you work in, what your expertise is. And I think that's really important is making scientific writing accessible for everyone. So just to go over the agenda today of some of the things we're going to discuss. First, I'm just going to go over, a brief overview of how to write a scientific research paper. Then we're going to look at something called the CGI method, which is great for writing abstracts. And then lastly, if you guys are up for it, I was hoping to do a practice looking at different abstracts and we can all comment and see what we think about them based on what we learned. So first, I just want to talk about different types of scientific writing. Um, First is original research. I feel like that's the most popular one or the one that most people think of when they think of scientific writing. That's, doing an experiment, finding results, and then publishing your findings. Um, Next are reviews. Um, Reviews are when you're focusing on one topic and you research a bunch of different papers reviewing that topic, and then you write kind of a summary about that topic. Um, there's also thesis and dissertations. So, for example, I wrote my honors thesis in college. If you go on to further education, you can be writing your dissertation to get your PhD. And that's more student written articles after 6 years of work to get a PhD. Um, there are case studies, those are more clinical and looking at certain diseases and what we find and patterns we see. And then lastly, presentations. I know that's not specifically writing, but you have to write your presentations, you have to make your posters for conferences. And that was my first intro into research as a student was presenting posters at conferences. And I think that's a great way to get involved in research and present your skills if you don't feel ready to write a full manuscript yet. So now I'm just going to go over kind of from start to finish what it takes to write a research article. So the first step, I know this might seem, very obvious, but you have to choose your topic. And it's very important that, for example, you choose a topic that interests you. So if you guys are in school and you're interested in joining a lab, or you just want to write a paper, maybe a review paper on a topic you're interested in, it's important that you get involved with the project that you're interested in because you're going to spend a lot of time and effort on it. And so you want to feel excited about it and you want to, be putting in those hours on that project. So choose something that interests you. Another thing I recommend is to narrow down your topic. If you choose something broad, for example, I study epilepsy. If I just chose epilepsy, that would be very wide and I'd be reading hundreds and hundreds of articles, but you can really to um, to certain facets of epilepsy. So looking at certain drugs, looking at histology, different things like that. So for example, like going from religion to world religion to Buddhism. So really narrowing it down to make that research more accessible. And then lastly, finding an area of research that hasn't been examined before. So you want to find an area where there's a gap in research, somewhere that people haven't studied before, haven't looked at. A way to do that is looking at articles you're interested in, and usually towards the end in the discussion, they'll say, in the future, we want to look at this. So that's a great way to find gaps in research and things that still need to be discovered. So, next is finding information. So, once you have a topic, you want to do something called a literature review. So, that's looking at a bunch of different articles and trying to learn more about the topic you chose. So, when looking for certain papers, I recommend paying attention to the domains. So ones like .edu, .gov, .org, and avoiding things like .com because you want to make sure you're finding credible sources and sources that are peer-reviewed and scientifically rigorous. So also looking at journals like ones like Nature, Science, Cell, depending on what you're interested in. There's journals for a bunch of different topics. But making sure they're credible because sometimes if you submit a paper and the journal sees you cited something that isn't credible, they won't accept your paper. So once you do your literature review, you have read through all the papers, evaluated, taken notes. One big tip I have is to use a free reference management software. So for example, I use Zotero, but there's also Mendeley, EndNote. These are again free, so they're welcome to for anyone to use, and they're a great way of tracking all the papers you read. It's as easy as you look on, for example, PubMed, which is used to find papers. You find a paper you like, you just drag the PDF into the Zotero, and it will create a citation for that paper. So at the end, when you're trying to get your bibliography together, that's a great way to stay organized. Okay, so you have your literature review done, you've found your topic. Um, the next step into writing this research paper is you want to state your thesis. So that also may seem very simple, but it's very important because it will guide you on how you write the rest of your paper. So when I was writing my thesis, I there were so many articles I was reading. I was very overwhelmed by the amount of information. And my mentor suggested that I write down my thesis statement in one sentence. So, I had to do some critical thinking, think, why am I researching this? What is the purpose of this? And then once you establish that, that will help you write the rest of your paper because you can see, okay, in order to, write about this, I need to back it up with this information. I don't need this information. So stating your thesis and finding, your purpose in writing this paper is really important. Next, what I did is I made an outline. So it kind of looks something like this on the side, just a list of bullet points of parts of your research paper. So quickly, I'm just going to go over the different parts of a research paper that is usually published in journals. So first, you have the abstract. That's the paragraph at the beginning of the paper that is a summary of your whole project. It kind of is a bit of each section and summarizes what you did. And then next, the introduction, that's kind of like stating your thesis statement and the purpose of why you're writing it, and you kind of back that up with background and different things you research in your literature review. And then next is the methods. That's how you conducted your research. Was this an experiment? What did you use certain software? So you want to write a very clear and concise methods so that other people can replicate your research. Next is results. These were your findings from your experiments. So this is where you have your tables, your figures, and you write what you found and whether or not these results were significant. And then lastly is the discussion or the conclusion. So that is where you write, what did these findings mean? and how do they apply to the real world? What can we do with these results? How can this affect the future? So, um, yeah, I know that was a little quick. So if you guys have any questions, just let me know. Um, so once you write your outline, next you want to organize your notes. So on the right over here is actually a screenshot from my outline that I worked on during my thesis. Don't worry about reading this. If you guys want at the end of the presentation, I think Ema's recording this so you guys can have the recording. So don't worry about reading everything on the slides. I know there's a lot there. But I just wanted to show an example of once you have those bullet points, the next step you want to do is you want to add your notes for each section, certain data you want to put in each section, certain quotes from different, authors or different papers, and start to expand or really build your paper up. And once you do that and you feel ready, you can actually start writing your draft. Um, so that can be very overwhelming, but since you've done all this work before, you really can feel ready to start writing. So as I said before, there's the abstract, the intro, the methods, results, discussion. You don't actually need to go in that order when you start writing. For example, for my thesis, I did not go in that order. I first started with the methods, since that's very straightforward. It's just what did you do? Then after data analysis, I wrote the results. So what did I find? And then the discussion, what do these findings mean? And then last, I went back to the intro and I wrote based on what I'd found in my literature review. And then the very last thing was the abstract, because the abstract is a summary and you want to save that for last because it is the most important part. So like I was saying, the abstract is the most important part because this is the first thing that people read and sometimes the last. So, for example, I pulled up this screenshot from PubMed. I just looked up epilepsy and this was the first paper that came up. So, when you look on a website like PubMed, usually you get the title of the article, the authors, the date, and the abstract. So, it's just one paragraph that summarizes your entire paper. And this is usually the only thing that people read. Because as you can see, they don't have access to the full paper until they click on this button. So this is really, when you're trying to pull people in, keep their interest and promote your research. So when I was writing my abstract, my mentors and my honors advisors, they always told me the abstract is the most important part. So today, that's what we're going to focus on because, you if you don't attract people with the abstract, then they might not read your paper that you worked so hard on. So you really want to keep it short, keep it to the point, but also show why your findings were important. So now I'm going to talk about the CGI method for writing an abstract. So this is a great tool to use when writing an abstract, of course, but also writing other things, just trying to get your point across. So CGI stands for content, gap, impact. So context is setting the stage, giving your audience some background about what the topic is. So like when you did your literature review, that all that background you researched and found, you want to put that in the first part of the abstract. Then you want to state the gap, state the problem or the purpose of the study. So, for example, why are you studying this? Why is this research needed? Because is there a gap in research that needs to be filled? So you're trying to say, this is why we're researching this. This is the purpose of the study. And then I, impact, is summarize what you found and why it matters. So this is kind of stating your results and what you found in the paper. And lastly, you can also add S, significance. why is this work important? How does it apply to the real world? Because that's really what people wonder is you did this research, you did this experiment, but how will it affect them and how will it affect everyone else? So those are the four main things you want to keep in mind when writing your abstract. So now I have an example abstract. I created some just using ChatGPT or AI. So these are not real abstracts. These are just used for learning purposes. But I just wanted to show an example of how you can use the CGI method when writing an actual paper. So first, context. In the red, it says state the problem. So in this abstract, it says refractory focal epilepsy remains difficult to manage despite multiple available anti-epileptic medications. So the problem is it's hard to treat epilepsy. So that's really what you want to state in the context, just a short, simple statement of your problem. Next, in the blue, the gap, explain why it matters. So this is saying few studies have evaluated the effectiveness of Neurovax as adjunctive therapy in this population. So Neurovax is just a drug that's used to treat epilepsy. And this is saying that the gap or why it needs to be studied is that it hasn't been tested. So that's a great reason for why you should do an experiment is to test a drug, for example. Impact, describe your results achieved. So in the green, it says Neurovax reduced monthly seizure frequency by 43% compared with 17% in the placebo group. And then P, that just means the significance of the findings. And you want them low, so less than zero point zero 0.05 is found to be significant, just because that means it wasn't left to chance. It was the drug that was causing these results. So this green statement is just saying this was our finding and it's significant. So that really grabs the reader because it says, oh, okay, this drug works. And then lastly, in the purple, significance, these findings suggest Neurovax may be effective adjunctive therapy for adults with refractory focal epilepsy. So this is just saying that this drug can be a treatment for epilepsy. So that's really all you need for an abstract. Usually they're a bit longer. They don't have to be just four sentences, but that's really the four main things you want to have in your abstract. Okay, so now I'm gonna do some practice problems. Um, I don't know if you guys want to answer or if you guys want to comment on the abstracts, but if not, I can also just go through them. But there's three, again, I wrote using ChatGPT, so they're not real studies, but I just wanted to illustrate, how to use the CGI method and also some other things you want to keep in mind when writing abstracts. Um, are there any comments in the chat or any questions?
No, it's just notification from our team.
Oh,
Please keep
okay.
going.
Okay, cool. All right. So, abstract number one, I'm just going to give you guys a little bit of time to read the abstract, and then we can look and see is there anything wrong with this one.
All right, to do this, Remy, I can think of maybe the participants can just write their answers on the chat box, or later on, we can just give them like a chance to speak up directly. Is that okay for you?
Yeah, yeah, whatever works. I'll just give you a bit of time to read it and think, and then you guys can answer either in chat if you don't feel like talking, or you can unmute and speak up.
Ya. Jadi bagi teman-teman silakan untuk menjawab apa latihan ini bisa responnya dituliskan di chat di kolom chat ya atau langsung raise your hand menggunakan fitur raise your hand. Jadi nanti kita bisa open mikrofonnya untuk merespon. Okay, so how many minutes do they have the chance to read?
Oh, as many as they need. We can take a couple minutes to read and
Okay.
think.
Sorry. Baik, mungkin sudah ada respon dari teman-teman. Silakan bisa di-drop komennya atau responnya di kolom chat ya. Atau misalnya berkenan bisa langsung speak up. Nanti kami arahkan untuk bisa bersama dengan speaker di sini. Okay, so here we have Dana. Dana says that the problem of the abstract is the drought. Okay, is the problem for all plants in the world. And the drought, okay, can give an influence to the plant in many ways. So I'm just translating her answer anyway.
Yeah.
I'm not,
Yeah,
like
yeah,
correct
of
whatever.
course.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
no, no
So that's
worries.
one of the answers. Okay. And then the second response is actually not to answer the practice, but it's kind of a question related to a
Mhm.
research gap. Probably we can just have it maybe later after the practice.
Okay. Great. So, the main purpose of this one I wanted to show is that um, it seems like you guys understood that it's saying drought is a major problem for plants. So, great, that's identifying the context. But what I was trying to get across with this abstract was that I found that it was too vague. So, it didn't say exactly how they did it. It didn't say exactly what the results were, and in that case, you can't really give an important impact. So, ways that you can fix this maybe is that it says, um, in this study, we looked at how plants react when they do not get enough water. So maybe they could say, we didn't give plants water for this amount of days, and then we gave water to a different group. So being a little clearer on your methods is a great way to make an abstract compelling and informative. Um, Another way you can make the results better is as when we exposed plants to drought conditions, they showed many differences in their growth and leaf characteristics. Maybe you could, special say specifically they didn't grow this much compared to a control, or their leaves were this color compared to a control. So being more specific and less vague can really capture an audience and make them interested in your work. Did that make sense? Or okay. All right, so we're gonna move on to the next abstract. There's just three, but I thought this would be a great way to look and see how we can apply the CGI method into examples. So this is abstract number two. Again, I'll give you guys a little bit of time to read it and see what you think may be wrong with this one.
Okay, so just to make it clear, I think like the students do not understand like what should they find from the abstract because most of them were actually responding about like the problem or the case told in the abstract.
Oh,
Yeah.
I see.
Jadi sebenarnya yang harus hari ini adalah apa sih kesalahan dari penulisan di abstrak itu begitu ya, bukan tentang apa kasus ataupun isu yang ada pada abstrak tersebut. Begitu ya teman-teman ya. Jadi yang masih menjawab problemnya terjadi perbedaan dalam pertumbuhan tanaman dan karakteristik tanaman misalnya akibat kekeringan atau kekurangan air. Nah, itu bukan itu yang ditanyakan, tapi yang ditanyakan adalah metode ataupun teknik penulisan atau elemen atau apa ya parts atau bagian dari abstrak tersebut yang salah itu yang mana begitu atau yang kurang itu yang mana seperti penjelasan tadi ya yang sebelumnya the previous one Rami was talking about can you please go to the
Yeah.
previous slide. Yeah, that suggests the answer. Okay, so that is the expected answer. Yeah. No specific methods or results given to make important impact. Jadi, nah, okay. So this is gonna be the response that's related to abstract number two. I will read it. Okay.
Oh yeah, sorry.
Okay.
I should clarify. I'm talking about the writing and how we can improve the writing, not the actual, content of the abstract. So looking at
Yeah.
what you think may be wrong with how they're getting their research across. So trying to see how can we improve the writing of the abstracts and how are they doing with looking at the context, looking at the gap, the impact, and the significance. So is it
Yeah.
getting that across? Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm gonna read the second response related to abstract two.
Oh,
The
okay.
abstract two, yeah, the second abstract is too general, not
Mhm.
specifying the method, variable, or the results specifically and quantitatively. And then the
Great.
second
Yeah.
response to that abstract is that the abstract is too general about drought and plants, and it doesn't really focus on a very clear research area, I would say, research area or research focus.
Yeah, great. So, yeah, that's exactly what um I was thinking too for this abstract. I felt like obviously this is an observational study rather than actually experimental, so they don't have quantitative results like someone else said. That's perfect. And it's still a little too vague about, what species of frogs, how many frogs, what measurements. So, you want to keep the abstract brief, but you also want it to be um, detailed and informative enough that they understand exactly what you're looking at. So for this one, all of what you guys said was correct, but I also wanted to point out that in scientific writing, you want to use third person or passive voice. So in this abstract, you can see they said, I checked how many frogs, I monitored the frogs. That's something you want to avoid in scientific writing because it's not really a narrative. It's more just saying what happened and what you found. So, for example, instead of saying, to prove this, I checked how the frogs, whatever, you should say, the study examined how frogs reacted to changes in water level. So, that's also another thing to keep in mind. When you're doing scientific writing, you want to be more, like you guys said, quantitative. You want to be more to the point. You don't want to have extra information or extra words like in a story or in a narrative. Because scientific writing is really to the point and concise. So that was great. You guys are really getting the hang of it. There's just one more, and this one's a little different. So this one's a little longer. The past two I showed were in paragraph form, but I also want to display an abstract that's more in sentence form. You can see it says background, one sentence, objective, methods, results, conclusion. This is another way that abstracts can be written. It really depends on what journal you're submitting to or how they want you to format your abstract, but this is another way to really make a clear set of CGI points, background, context, um, gap, objective, impact, results, and then conclusion could be the significance. So this is a very clear way of writing your research and really getting your points across. So I just want to give you guys a little bit more time to read this one because I know it's a little longer, and then we can discuss what we think about this abstract.
Oke, silakan teman-teman. Jika ada respon bisa open mic atau mengirimkannya lewat chat ya, chat yang ada di Zoom. Okay. That is one of the responses. I can read it for you. The abstracts has complete standards of scientific writing
Mhm.
because the data are specific with clear method and subjects.
Yeah, great. Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking. I feel like this is very structured and complete. It has a clearly defined objective. It tells you exactly what they're studying and why. There are numerical results, and you can see statistically that they're significant by their p-values. And then it has a great conclusion. So I know this was a bit of a jump from the other two because the other two were had a lot of issues, but I feel like this abstract is very well done, and this is a great example of an abstract in scientific writing. Um, so this is great. Um, okay, so that was all I had for you guys today. I think that's a great, little introduction into how to write scientifically and how to focus on writing impactfully, using the CGI method. So again, context, gap, impact, significance. And you can use this for writing, but also, I've used this, to answer interview questions. I've used this in all different ways. It's a great way to just structure writing and really get your point across. Um, and also, just it helps you not to forget your main thesis statement, which is really the whole point of your writing and the whole point of your research. Um, and again, I want to just reiterate, I was once, a student. I was once in my first year of college, and I was very scared to get involved in research and to get involved in scientific writing. But it's so powerful and it's so important, and it's such a great skill to have to convey your ideas effectively, um, because this will allow, your information and your research to reach multiple audience. So practicing this skill and participating in research is something I cannot recommend enough. So I have this little thing that just says just start because, it might be daunting, it might be scary, but once you start writing and you start participating in research, you can really feel like you're making a difference. So thank you guys for having me. Um, that was all I had today. So here's my email if you guys want to reach out to me or if you have any questions. And then also I can open it up for a Q&A if you guys have any more questions about research or scientific writing or anything.
Well,
Thank
thank
you.
you so much, Rami, for that wonderful presentation. I really appreciate you brought up like, techniques of writing, especially for those who are, in not in that phase yet. Sometimes like
Mhm.
people or like students, still feel not confident. Like how do they write
Mhm.
their idea, especially in the medical subject. Well, okay, let me go back to one of the questions I got here. So the question is that how do we find a research gap? How do we find a research gap?
Yes, so that's a great question because it can be daunting to and scary to feel like you want to research something, but you don't know where to research it or how to research it. Um, I've definitely felt that when I was doing my honors thesis, trying to figure out exactly where I can contribute. So I think I said this before, but a great way to start is by looking for a topic. So for example, I said a lot in the presentation. I'm interested in neuroscience. I'm interested in epilepsy. So if I went to a couple epilepsy papers and I looked and I read through them, a lot of times in the discussion, or the end, the conclusion, scientists will say, this is what happened in our study, but this is where we think we need to go in the future, or this is where we still haven't, discovered this or done this. So that's a great way of finding gaps in research is looking to see what other scientists are saying or what they're doing and what they haven't done before. But also even replicating studies is such a great contribution to research. Really doing anything. So it really starts with just doing a literature review, finding your topic, and then reading papers.
Okay, I hope that answers your question. Well, if there are students who want to ask again, let me just, like pull the question to the forum. Are there any more questions? Ada pertanyaan yang lain mungkin dari teman-teman yang ada di sini? Okay, let's just give them a couple of minutes to think a question probably or maybe comment atau komentar gitu ya. Apa namanya ada referensi lain mungkin ya yang dibaca kok tidak sama atau apa namanya ada hal-hal yang baru mungkin ditemukan di bacaan yang lain dan bisa ditanyakan di sini dikomparasikan silakan teman-teman.
Yeah, so just a few ideas I had about other things I can talk about. Another great thing in research as a student or as a young researcher is to find a mentor or someone that you feel like can support you on your research journey. So, someone that might be in the field that you're interested in, or a professor that's doing research, finding people that can help you and support you with your scientific writing by being a reviewer, by, I used to read articles and review them with one of my professors, just because I was interested in a topic she was researching. So, doing things like that is a great first step into getting involved in research, finding good mentors, finding good papers to read, things like that. So, it really is accessible to everyone if you find an interest in it.
All right, so there is two more questions here, Remy. Maybe
Okay.
we can have after these two questions, we can have another question, the other question, I mean. So the next question is that, do you think that all health research is the same? Maybe in terms of the techniques of writing them.
All all research studies are the same, or all papers are written the same?
Yeah, in health science, I mean.
Yeah, so I think that's a great question. Scientific writing is very unique because it is very formulaic. There's certain things you have to talk about, certain things you have to cover. And so, yeah, I think there, in some ways, a lot of papers are written very similarly because, there's no extra sentences and things that you can add your own personal flair to. It's really just stating what you researched, what your results were, how you did them, and how you think that can impact the world. So, yeah, I do think what I found, this is another great point. When I was starting to write my thesis and starting, on my scientific writing journey, reading papers is a great way to figure out how other scientists write, how other researchers write, because they are very formulaic, and there are certain ways that you can just look at other papers. How did they do this, and how can I apply that to my study? So I do think, in a way, that a lot of papers are written very similarly. So that is a great point.
Okay, moving on to the next question. What is the initial step to formulate a thesis? I mean, maybe I think this one is for undergraduate thesis,
Mm.
like in general. And oh, sorry, this is for master's thesis. So the question is to
Oh, okay.
formulate a master thesis. Okay, what is the initial step to formulate a master thesis? And then, do you think that do you think that we can have the same idea from our undergraduate thesis to write our master's thesis? So maybe like, can we develop a topic from our undergraduate thesis to be our master's thesis? So maybe that's the question.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that a lot of times when people find some a topic they're interested in, they usually stick to it. So, you know, like I've kind of stuck with neuroscience and I've been in a lot of neuroscience labs. I think that if you are at the same school and you're in the same lab and you can do your master's thesis with the same person you did your undergraduate thesis with, that's great. You probably can go more in depth because now you're a master's student and all your time is spent on research. Um, I think it depends on what program you're in and what labs you're in, but yes, definitely sticking in the same area at least of a topic is great because you can build on the knowledge you already know. But yeah, I haven't done a master's thesis. I've only done my undergraduate, so I'm not really sure how that works, but I think that's definitely something you can do and something you can apply for when thinking about certain schools or certain programs.
Okay, that's pretty good answer, Remy. Thank you so much for answering the question.
Of
Well,
course.
this one is from Alicia. Alicia is asking about, um, okay, what are the common problems or the problem issues we found from beginner writer, especially in writing medical abstract? And then how do we avoid those issues?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, I think a lot of times, like in the examples I showed today, people are either too vague, so they leave out important information, or they provide too much information. So they're too long, they're too bulky, and they don't really um, get to the point exactly that you need to show. So I think having a fine balance of not being too vague, but not giving too much information is something you have to think about when writing an abstract. Um, I remember when I was writing mine with my advisor, he said, I wanted to include so many other things because I was like, oh, we have to put this in about what we did or this finding. But he said, no, you really want to highlight your main findings, highlight your main purpose, your main goal, because that's really what people are interested in. And that's the whole point of the paper and of the essay. So, yeah, I think it's definitely a very difficult thing. It takes a lot of practice, a lot of drafts. That's another thing I want to say. Don't expect to have them done in one draft or even two. You're going to need to find reviewers, find people you trust to read, mentors maybe. Um, and so it definitely takes time, but finding that balance and finding, a good way to convey your research it's hard, but it's definitely possible. So either cutting things or adding things, you have to think about it. Depends on your topic.
Okay, I hope that answered your question. Okay, one last question. What
Okay.
are the strategies to write a strong abstract, but not too overwhelming or excessive?
Yeah. I think so. When I was writing mine, again, I said it was the last thing I wrote. I think having that outline really helped me because it made me, I wrote mine like the third abstract, so I had it in the sentence format because that's what the journal I was publishing it required. So, having that outline and having that sentence format really helps you to identify, okay, I need to put this in the background information part. I need to put this as the result. And so being able to put it in one sentence format for each part, I think really helps. Even if you're doing it in paragraph form, you can start with those one sentences in each part and then form it into a paragraph. So yeah, I think that's a really great trick. I think also having great reviewers and having great people to point out, this might be something you want to get rid of. This might be something you want to add. Someone who's on your research team or who knows your topic well, it can really help with writing.
All right, so I think that is the last question we can have today. Um, well, Remy can stop sharing because we are gonna close our meeting today. Well, thank you so much, Remy, for again the wonderful presentation. I think it gives a lot of insights to like beginner writers, especially
Mhm.
those who are trying to figure out like how do I start my writing because maybe you don't have like experience before to write your own undergraduate thesis or scientific article. Well, anyway, to wait a second. Okay, like to further talking about like some assistance of your work probably at school, yeah, or at college. So let us just, go through Sastra Lingua Indonesia best or like services that usually we can have it for academician, research, and also students who are currently, writing their thesis. So let me just go through the information. Jadi teman-teman di sini kami akan memberikan informasi seputar beberapa layanan dari Sastra Lingua Indonesia yang dapat membantu dalam penulisan ilmiah teman-teman semua, baik yang ada di kampus ataupun di luar kampus yang bergelut dalam bidang penulisan ilmiah, begitu ya. So, ini merupakan beberapa listnya, di antaranya adalah proofreading service atau layanan proofreading yang kami sediakan adalah proofreading dari lokal editor ya ataupun juga proofreading dari native editor dan ini bergantung dari permintaan teman-teman ya. Jadi kalau misalnya dari jurnal yang dituju nantinya meminta native editor, maka bisa ditanyakan kepada tim kami tentang layanan proofreading by native editors. Kemudian juga ada layanan asistensi publikasi jurnal yang memfasilitasi penerbitan artikel jurnal ilmiah mulai dari proses awal hingga akhir begitu ya dengan syarat klien kami harus memiliki full text lengkap dan di situ nanti bisa kami berikan saran-saran apa yang bisa menjadi apa namanya peningkatan pada teks tersebut agar bisa eligible atau bisa sesuai dengan standar penerbitan jurnal ilmiah begitu. Bisa dicek nanti di Instagramnya Sastra Lingua Indonesia. Berikutnya juga ada layanan penerjemahan. Di sini kami menyediakan layanan penerjemahan tersumpah, tersertifikasi ataupun yang umum untuk teman-teman yang saat ini melakukan let's say penelitian ya dan melakukan validasi kuesioner certified translation ya untuk memvalidasi hasil dari apa namanya penyesuaian kuesioner yang mungkin disadur dari bahasa lain ke bahasa Indonesia atau juga misalnya ada perjanjian-perjanjian yang dilakukan antar sesama peneliti misalnya juga bisa menggunakan layanan penerjemahan tersumpah kami yang memang khusus disediakan untuk penerjemahan dokumen legal. Berikutnya juga ada apa layanan cek plagiarisme. tingkat plagiarisme atau similarity check ya, yang di sini bisa teman-teman lihat. Kami menggunakan aplikasi Turnitin atau software Turnitin untuk mengecek kesamaan tulisan dari klien kami. Kemudian selain similarity check, pada Turnitin Checker ini kami juga memiliki layanan pendeteksi apa kesamaan penulisan oleh AI begitu ya pada software yang sama yaitu Turnitin atau bisa kita sebut sebagai AI Generated Detection Service. Jadi kalau misalnya nanti teman-teman ingin begitu ya tahu apakah tulisannya ini ternyata tulisan orang yang teman-teman koreksi ataupun apa namanya teman-teman sendiri begitu ya masih apa bingung ataupun masih ragu apakah tulisan saya bebas dari deteksi AI, silakan bisa menggunakan AI Generated Detection Service. Ini beberapa testimoni dari klien kami mengenai layanan-layanan ilmiah kit tadi ya yang sudah saya sebutkan sebelumnya, mulai dari proofreading, kemudian translation, dan lain sebagainya. Dan berikutnya, jika teman-teman ingin mengkonsultasikan mungkin ya naskah teman-teman semua ya, atau juga rencana begitu ya, rencana untuk publikasi ilmiah artikel yang teman-teman saat ini sedang kerjakan, bisa langsung Wastra Lingua Indonesia di nomor WhatsApp kami di layar bisa dilihat atau juga bisa mengirimkan email di admin@sastralingua.co.id. Oke. Oke, jika ada pertanyaan lebih lanjut seputar apa saja yang bisa kami bantu untuk kelancaran penulisan ilmiah teman-teman, silakan bisa mengunjungi Instagram kami atau bisa langsung chat di WhatsApp. Dan kami juga memberikan akses kepada teman-teman semua untuk bergabung di Information Center grup kami. Ini kami sudah ini ya, apa namanya berikan informasinya di sana. Teman-teman bisa bergabung di grup WhatsApp. Di sana kami biasanya akan share tentang informasi beasiswa, writing tips ya, ataupun informasi studi ke luar negeri serta layanan-layanan yang bisa digunakan oleh akademisi begitu. Nah, jadi mumpung sekarang Sastra Lingua Indonesia hadir di kampus ya, teman-teman semua, jadi nanti bisa langsung bergabung ke grupnya dan bisa apa namanya catch up bareng gitu ya, apa saja keperluan yang bisa kami fasilitasi begitu. Baik, so I think that's all for today. Terima kasih banyak kepada Mas Chandra ya yang sudah memberikan waktunya dan juga memberikan kesempatan kepada kami untuk bisa sharing pengalaman begitu ya dengan teman-teman yang ada di Banten ya dan juga memberikan apa namanya em, waktu kepada kami juga untuk bisa apa ya sharing expertise lah ya atau skill yang sudah dimiliki oleh tim kami. Baik. Kalau tidak ada pertanyaan lagi, terima kasih banyak bagi teman-teman yang sudah hadir pada webinar kali ini dan semoga Sastra Lingua Indonesia bisa hadir kembali ya dengan tema yang berbeda atau topik berbeda. Terima kasih banyak and have a good one. Bye bye. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.